Hi Dragons! So now we're on part 3 of Victimology. We were just talking about Wolfgang and Amir and how Amir really set the stage for victim blaming, especially in cases of rape. He listed a bunch of factors that helped precipitate rape in his research opinion. Basically, it was his interpretation of the data from the Philadelphia data set. Seductive actions by women, wearing revealing clothing, risque language, having a bad reputation, and being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So hearing these things today is really shocking for modern criminal justice researchers. And I think that if he had a lot of pushback in the day when he published this. So today, if he would to publish something like this, it would really be intense. But it's part of the evolution and the history of research and the path that they had to take to get there, and then ultimately do better research in the area. He was saying things like, the victim tantalizes the offender as if the offender has no volition of their own and no control of their own behavior. So these results point to the fact that the offender shouldn't have been the sole cause, but that the victim had something to do with it, according to Amir. So yes, he sparked a lot of controversy and a lot of criticism. People came down on him very hard during that. So some of the criticisms were, as you can imagine, from women's groups, including women academics, researchers who had found different things that he didn't include in their research, other police departments and police accounts and police data. He had, of course, some methodological errors in his research and just some bad hypotheses and theories. And so he suggested that the victims psychologically prompted the rape that they really wanted, which was really another insulting kind of thing that he had done, and that the man was just responding to what the female was putting out there. So that led to a lot of criticism, and they say that the response from academia was quote unquote blistering. So it was really bad. So instead of they did throw out a lot of Amir's research, and a lot of research came out that contradicted that, and so they wanted a better definition of victim precipitation. So the next researchers that we looked at were Franklin and Franklin. So they also were looking at victim precipitation, but their approach was a little bit more productive, and they had 4 different assumptions. Number 1, victim precipitation assumes that the behavior of the victim can explain the criminal act, and maybe not. Just because of what the victim does doesn't mean that automatically and without conscious thought does the perpetrator act. You can't just say, well, the victim was asking for it, they went into a bar at night. Well, a lot of people go into bars at night. They're not necessarily asking to be beaten or raped or anything like that. 2, victim precipitation states that offenders are triggered by the victim's behavior. Well, that doesn't discuss premeditated crimes. What about those? 3, Franklin and Franklin disagreed that the victim's behavior is necessary and sufficient to trigger a crime. Many offenders commit crimes without any trigger at all from the victims. And 4, victim precipitation states that the intent of the victim can be gauged by the victimization incident. You can't gauge intent, because intent is always subjective on the person who's observing the behavior. So there's no need for criminal court proceedings beyond identification of the person who committed the crime, according to Franklin and Franklin. So other problems were that victim precipitation studies don't address the offender completely. Instead, they imply that the offender, all offender behavior is equal, which it is not. Offenders do commit different crimes for different reasons and different circumstances. So this was the first one that really kind of looked at that. And along with that, a researcher named Curtis had a precipitation grid, which you can find in your book. And he plotted intent and victimization on a grid with 5 different degrees of precipitation. And offender responsibilities for each one. And victim precipitation was only one factor out of many factors, okay? So last thing I want to cover, the 2 big things for Friday's class. We'll continue on Tuesday. So for Friday's class is the difference between general victimology and critical victimology. So general victimology came about because people wanted to get off of victim precipitation, and they wanted to get a more holistic view of the field. And Mendelssohn called on victimology to move out of the provincial backwaters of criminology and come into its rightful domain. So Mendelssohn really wanted to have a completely distinct and separate field looking at victimology, and let's make this field a subfield in criminal justice, which it is. So he wanted to have a global, larger focus, more global focus. And this is what he meant by general victimology. And he had 5 different types of victimology. A criminal cause victimization. Oneself, the victim of oneself, which included suicide, things that people do for self-harm. The social environment, and this had to do with class and race and group oppression, war, things like that. So what kind of environment was the person in and that their victimization took place in. And then technology. The victim became a victim because of technology, and that can be anything, computer crime, that's what we think of most, but even like simple things like technology, different technologies in the workplace that might cause harm, or automobiles, or any kind of thing like that. And then the victim of a natural environment, which is like disasters, hurricanes, crises, different things like that, natural disasters. Smith and Weiss looked at general victimology, and they had 4 different areas that looked at definitions of victims, applications, victim reactions after victimization, which is very interesting. What does being a victim do to someone? Not only psychologically, but emotionally, financially, all those different applications. And then what is society's reaction to victims, and how does that social response to victims affect victims and society in general? So general victimology is very broad and concerned with all aspects of victimization. Any aspect of application that you can think of is covered under general victimology. So the second one that I want to talk about, and we're going to leave on this one, is critical victimology, which I really enjoy critical victimology because it is ever evolving and ever changing, just like general victimology too. But critical victimology really says, look, in victimology we have to discuss the basic foundations of what is crime. What is crime? What is actually illegal and what should be illegal and what was illegal and is no longer illegal, and how has society changed, and with it what we're calling a crime. Okay, so like you can think of different things where we have waffled over what is a crime. So when I was a kid, the drinking age was 18, and then we changed it so then to 21. So then all of a sudden, if you're drinking and you're 18, then 2 weeks ago it was okay, it was legal, and now it's not. So that's what critical victimology is. It's like, what's a crime, what's not a crime? And we can see that today in terms of like marijuana, legalization of marijuana, other kinds of drugs like that. Different sorts of crimes. One of the big ones, we're going to see a film on this, is incarceration of NVDOs, nonviolent drug offenders. We're going to talk about that. We're going to see some video on that. And should those really be crimes? So it's always evolving. It's always questioning. As society changes, we're looking at, is this a crime? Should this be a crime? What should the punishment be? So that's critical victimology, and it's an attempt to examine the wider social context of what is a crime, what is a criminal act, and who are the victims, right? So like I could say to you guys to think about who are the victims of the insurrection on the Capitol? Were there any victims on the Capitol? The other day I was watching them clean up the Capitol, and they have a lot of repairs to make, and I'm like, who's going to make those repairs? The taxpayers going to pay for that? Shouldn't the people who broke all that stuff be paying for it? Why should the taxpayers pay for that? So that's critical victimology, thinking of, was this a crime, and then who pays? And then how much do they pay? Oh, how do they pay? Is it going to be retribution? Is it going to be restitution? What is it going to be? So critical victimology looks at actions as crimes, whether they should be crimes. The things that we had that were criminal before that are no longer criminal. Well, what happened there? Why did that change? Like if you look at prohibition, it was totally terrible, illegal, and then all of a sudden, okay, it's legal now. So all of those things, which is really interesting. Many crimes are committed by powerful people in society with little to no consequences. Why do the rich and powerful people, get away with things that ordinary folks wouldn't? You could ask that about racial injustice, gender inequality, all kinds of things. Genocide, political crimes, all of those kinds of things, white collar crime, smuggling, human slave trade, deportation, consumer fraud, corporate fraud, all of those things. So trying to decide just what is a crime sometimes and what should be considered a crime, that's critical victimology. And I really enjoy examining critical victimology, especially the evolution, especially the historical evolution, why we considered one thing illegal before and now it's not, or the opposite. Why didn't we consider this a crime before and now it is? So we'll talk about that as we continue in the course. So that's going to be it for today, all the way up to critical victimology. And on Tuesday, we'll continue with the intro. Okay? So I'll see you on Tuesday through the forum. Okay? Make sure you get that in and watch the video and follow along with the PowerPoint and the lecture. And that's it. We'll see you on Tuesday. It's a great day to be a dragon.